Good morning. I hope you're doing well if you are here. I'm just gonna try to turn this up without. There we go. Higher, higher, higher. Okay, let's see if that audio warps correctly. There we go. Aye, nice. Okay, I'm learning how to use this like pad. It's a little easier and a little more complicated than that. It's not, but that's okay. So that song was Hello Dear Me Reimagined by Joseph. Wow, wow. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Music in Megabytes, and this is a live stream. I'm still trying to figure out how to like set up the camera part, but whatever. Good morning. Good morning. If you okay, I'm gonna have a really quick conversation in like 7 different ways. Um, but the topics of today's conversation, for those of you listening on the podcast or the audio, are drug decriminalization in DC and Will in less than 48 hours. The idea, sorry, it's in the back. I was like, oh, it's still playing. um, the idea of drug decriminalization and the reality of drug decriminalization. The speed at which I can speak more intriguingly enough. And that's a third party argument. The idea of grade 11 law class, Glaju for teenage boys, and what specifically a shelter for working girls is. But thank you. I would like to have a really big conversation about what a shelter for working girls is without disenfranchising the community. But sadly, and right now, and in real time, I do not think drug decriminalization has occurred at the legal level properly. I don't agree that everyone should know everyone's drug like that. Privacy is relationally important, and I'm not stupid. Unsafe drugs are still unsafe drugs. I'm sadly not going to be kind about it like that. I'm not going to be rude though. Unsafe drugs need to be collaterally claused. Unsafe drugs also kill people. Unsafe food care also kills people. There is a reason in Ontario why all healthcare settings must code and abide with writtens on every single piece of packaging. Proper writtens, signal writtens, and WMIS writtens. If you're an actual proper setting, you're clausing everything in under WMIS, by the way. That is about how much people know. That is about an ethical hire, and that is about a healthcare hire. It is about a scientist hire, by the way. I'm going to be really rude and say most people don't want to work with a scientist because they immediately see the idea of scientists fraudulent. These are also like I don't want to say anti-scientist activists because I understand why the idea of science has been collaterally damaged by white supremacy. If that makes, it obviously makes sense and I understand why, by the way. If you are listening to Dr. Joel Beverell, I think it's Beverell. I'm so sorry if I'm saying it wrong. I'll look later. Sometimes I skip letters, divas, and I do know I do this. But if Dr. Joel is not on your follower list, I would recommend, sorry, not your following list. You know what I mean. If you're not following Dr. Joel Beverell or Beverell, I would recommend immediately following this brilliant anti-racist doctor who understands that there are two twins in the conversation, and one is a redhead and looks and presents white, and one is black, visually by skin tone, hair, and eye color. That is a big deal in the conversation about the quality of healthcare both of these individuals won't receive, and why. I think this video is brilliant, by the way. I have never seen a faster video explaining what I have been attempting to explain as the mixed child in the middle, but this is exactly the point. I am, by all intents and purposes, that middle mixed, like triplet. For example, I'm just gonna take a second to breathe because I understand this is a really tumultuous conversation. If you don't trust Black doctors though, you do need to explain why. If you don't trust Black science, I don't personally trust you. If you don't trust that Black scientists in Africa and in South Africa in particular, women cured AIDS, they did. Like, they definitely did, by the way. Just so you know. The data that was appreciated here in colonial Canada, the data that was appreciated in the Upper European Caucasus, the data that will be appreciated in Asia nonetheless, will specifically come from a Black community and then an Asian past community understanding the difference in systemic ethnic rate. That is not difference in like drug issues or this, that, and the other. No. This isn't like Black people feel less pain issue. This is, will an Asian community with different other healthcare be impacted the same way by PrEP? If you're eating differently, yes, it already does, and it already will. Because the first clause about any drug that an individual needs to take is, are they nourished and hydrated? Nourished and hydrated. If the individual in your space that you are offering drugs to is not properly nourished and hydrated, you have committed baseline potential second-degree manslaughter the second the drug impacts the user or the client or the patient the wrong way. This, for example, is why people don't like getting the vaccine. Like whatever, the COVID vaccine, a Pfizer up for like another reason. People don't like, you know what I mean? Like if I have to list all these vaccines, I hope we already get it. Flu vaccine, like, yeah. Medication is variably untested. Like for the most part, you have to do your own research. And the issue is the idea of your own research being claused so ethically high in an intelligence factor is another issue, but that's another issue. This will bring you back to the conversation about how many people died because they didn't get the COVID vaccine. There are obviously people in the middle who died with and without the vaccine. I am not stupid. I'm sadly assuming they were undernourished, because I will agree that any common cold can kill you on a malnourishment clause. Any common cold, any common flu can kill someone on a malnourishment issue. Full conversation. Full conversation though. What do you drink to hydrate yourself? In colonial Canada, and including the Ontario border near Detroit, the water is toxic. In multiple nations, in multiple places. The concept of water bottles is fraudulent to begin with because the plastic seeps into the water. The rate of cancer increases and decreases based on the room's intake of something like a microplastic, which is why, i.e., a Black person might just go, just drink from the tap, before they understand like the awareness of clean water, because the Black person will already be aware that like the microplastic is the issue. Does that make sense? You can then get into a conversation about the idea of tap water funneling and the idea of clean sewage and aqueducts, which is very rare, actually, by the way. It's very, very, very rare to find clean and relatively lead-free aqueducts. I went to a high school, as far as I'm concerned, with lead in the pipes. Like, do you know what does that make sense? Like, why this has to like start and end at like sage and fresh water, or like whatever fresh water means? Because right now, in my opinion, controversial take, the best solution to fresh water will and remain homogenized and or hydrating milk products. Really controversial take for some people. I'm going to stand on it. I'm going to stand on it. Babies survive solely off milk, solely off the ideas of formula, off the ideas of ethical care in dairy products, and the ethical consumption of dairy products. So this means if you're like lactose intolerant, this is not going to help you in a minute. So you have to find like your ethical milk alternative or whatever's going to hydrate you. If you're lactose intolerant, you might actually need the water bill. And I would understand that entirely. I don't think milk is killing people though. So that's another conversation. Unless you're like deathly allergic to lactose or something like that. I have no idea how you are. I'll look that up later, I guess. Like I'll put it on my like list of like problem addendums. Do you know what I mean? What is a lactose allergy to someone dehydrated? That is electrolyte addition. That is level checking. That is risking a conversation about what legal non-diabetes looks like in a person's body. Because if you're over or under nourishing yourself, you're going to end up with an like inaccurate like level clause no matter what somewhere. And I'm kind of aware it will like continue to end up at like, can you keep yourself healthy? This includes obviously access to healthy food, priced accurate access to milk, access to boiled water, access to clean water, access to a lot of other things. For 200 on Jeopardy, what is world hunger ending? What does it look like? Sadly, end of conversation on that one. You know what I mean? Like, I can't fix that. I can try as hard as I can to conceptualize the idea of world hunger ending. But world hunger ending means if you ain't going to pay for a grilled cheese, I don't know what you donate to. Quoted. We're going to take a 2.5 minute break. We're going to shuffle, listen to a song, and just regroup. Oh, no. Ooh. Okay, at 3 minutes and 28 seconds, there is your edit for dance. I was supposed to be in dance this. My stupid dropout clause pissed me off so much, but I was like, I am not doing that, actually. I feel so offensive too when I dropped out of McMaster. I was like, no, this is not how I'm going to run this school year, actually. If you data point know, I was a student at McMaster University from 2019 to 2022 in the winter term. Basically, during the fifth wave of COVID here in calendar colonial Canada in 2022, I was flying out to Vancouver to visit a partner. At that point, I had decided that I was just gonna like stay by accident if it was correct, because the waves of COVID had been so inappropriate that I was like, if I get stuck here, I'm gonna get stuck here. Like, this isn't funny. Like, just so you know, like, I'm risking a plane freight flight basically and a COVID ticket. I don't think personally, reading week doesn't end until the Monday when the first bell rings. Okay. Anything done on the weekend is non-mandatory for any clubs. And anything done during this weekend, in my opinion, is actually detrimental to an individual who might be visiting home. And I personally will not condone, in the long run, any club who uses the reading week like this. I fucking hate that McMaster uses the reading week like this. I don't think it's ethical. I think it's irresponsible. I think it's degrading to the students. I think that there is no way that this reading week use during like the arts and culture clubs stands test. I think it's obnoxious. I think it's a mandatory off time ask that actually produces a grain rate of systemic racism, systemic disenfranchisement, and a lack of acknowledgement of culture clauses. My personal 2 cents. When I was asked during the wave to reproduce this date, the Saturday and the week, during a wave though, I said no. I said, this is actually going to be my issue with the use of the reading week, and I'm going to clause out on feeling abused on my holiday. That's my 2 cents on something that I signed up to do and then disagreed with during a COVID wave. Do I think I learned my lesson during that COVID wave? Yes, actually. Because I think paid holiday time off should not be reclaused in as your like community grain space to get further in arts and culture. I think it's irresponsible, actually. I have and will take this stance again, and I don't agree with under ethical club space like that. Controversial take. Figure out how to move that fucking tech week, girl. Like, I'm so serious. Every single club needs to figure out how to move that tech week. Other clubs do it. McMaster Musical Theater does not have to keep that tech week there. If you don't understand the idea of a pandemic wave occurring as a university, I also understand that a university like fraudulently flawed themselves under a table. I personally understand that McMaster funded a war tactic that I didn't appreciate, and I decided to leave. That being said, I did send an email to my professor, and I was like, yo, Dr. Egan, if I have an absurdist student paper for you right now, this is why Waiting for Godot exists. I got, let me know if you need help back in, baby. Not baby, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Sorry. I hear it like this. Sometimes I'm like, because I'm like that as a teacher. Not necessarily as Dr. Egan like that, because he's not. But he is nice like that, right? When you are an ACE student writing about queer history and the pandemic, and like legally step down as your work disenfranchises yourself and you pendulum hit, that's when someone drops out to move schools. That is when someone drops out to move schools. The university I was at is so brilliant for healthcare. that is the only place I have ethically gotten hormones like that. Like that. I'm not going to say I didn't do the work for it, and I'm not going to say I didn't do therapy. It took me 4 months of bi-weekly to monthly therapy. Personally closed in, by the way. And I will explain why in a minute. And by February 14th, I had been given the prescription for the bottle. Therapy for trans people is important because it's not therapy, though. Proper drug decriminalization starts in this type of room, though. It starts in the idea of a therapy room. It starts in the concept of the therapy room, because the therapist will ask you, what is your biggest concern with your healthcare? Is it your mental wellness, and why? In 2019, I walk into McMaster University fresh off of a gap year, basically. I spend my 2017 to 2018 year in Sheridan's creative writing and publishing program before dropping out basically on like relational class. I felt so irritated too. I was like, I'm a creative nonfiction poet. I'm a creative nonfiction poet writing essays about how important drug injection sites are in BC, because I know in a second that Claus is a hormone injection site. Drug injection sites, though. Clean 15-minute drug injection sites. I aced this paper, by the way. I personally believe in the idea of a drug consumption site for every single drug. Every single drug. You can adjust the rooms. You can create new rooms. You can create specific rooms that are clause A only for hormones, only for individuals open to all drug use, only for individuals who are not. This is when I finger cross, though. This is when I finger cross and I say not all drugs are allowed to co-interact. An overdose consumption site, in my personal opinion, requires you to register the drug you are taking with the staff. I do not think this is high barrier. I do not think this is high barrier. This is your healthcare safety and the room's healthcare safety. If the staff don't know what you took and why, that is why decriminalization exists again. I wish I could be nicer about this as a statistician. If the nurse sees me injecting and I am in a room with a benzodiazepine, but I've injected my testosterone, and I start to have a reaction, a tardive dystonia reaction, as has been well documented and has been called legal grade level low anaphylaxis by a pharmacist to my face. I need Cogentin. I would need Cogentin. I wouldn't need naloxone. I wouldn't need any other type of antidote. I'd need Cogentin. This drug is primarily disseminated in the United States and Japan as a counteract access praxis drug. And sometimes it's prescribed with the schizophrenia drug at the same time. I personally have tried a lot of mental health drugs under very specific witness clauses. Like extremely specific witness clauses. When I was younger, I had like high grade night terrors as a child of like being abducted and raped and like getting like legally assaulted by a man in like a warehouse. And like it's so bizarre to be like, I don't have this day fear actually, like usually at all. Because I had this nightmare as a child. Like I had this nightmare about this like creepy bald man being like, I'm gonna kill you in a second after this tea party, Carly, just so you know. And I was like, whoa, I actually get why that's a trauma nightmare, Mom. This isn't funny. I can't sleep at night. And I'm screaming when I wake up. I am consuming unsolved videos on no praxis relevant to that because I'm just aware of this idea. I'm aware I live in the city at this point where like a teenage girl has gone missing and been killed like down the street. And like at this point, this is one of the first high level cases in this area. Rest in peace, Leslie Mahaffey. Rest in peace, Kristen French, and every girl who died at the hands of Carla Molka and Paul Bernardo. True rehabilitation needs to happen, and true rehabilitation needs to happen. For the data, that is what happened. It's so bizarre to think that a group of young women, perceived as such or not, aren't impacted by this conversation about the Scarborough rapists, the Scarborough killers, whatever you wanted to call them at the time. This group of teenagers is detrimentally impacted by hearing about this murder. Fact. It doesn't have to be these two doing it no more. The idea of this murder happened. I look like brown Leslie Mahaffey as a teenager. I'm so aware of it so quickly. It doesn't matter to me. I basically say, why am I going to stop living my life? I'll keep my secrets, and make sure that someone always knows where I am and someone's safe. The conversation around this specific set of case types in British Columbia colonial is under an MMIW clause, which would be murdered and missing Indigenous women, Two-Spirit, trans people, and girls. I haven't even started discussing the idea of the doctor's office being where some of these girls die yet. Because I still haven't gotten back to 1950s America. My entire conversation around drugs and drug clauses and drug culture has to be able to clause out the death in the hospital of the woman on the bell jar issue. If you are unaware of what the bell jar issue is, it is the legal awareness that the woman, in any way, shape, or form, will very highly likely, like Dr. Joel has discussed, been and will continue to be mismedicated on clause of attempted murder. That includes the attempted murder of Black mothers, the murder of Black mothers, the attempted murder of white women in healthcare, the attempted murder of Indigenous women, the attempted murder of culture praxis. This is why people don't trust science. I'm not dumb, okay? I'm not stupid. Current modernized science, post-Renaissance, is innately and continually decried by BIPOC populations, specifically because white men practice on people. The issue then comes back in the point, then what is practice? What is this, that, and the other, yada, yada, yada. You have to trust your doctor. If you do not trust your doctor, you are legally allowed to ask for the next one. And you are legally required to be given the next one. If you happen to kick it in between on a non-issue from the hospital, that's your responsibility, sadly. Don't kick it. Don't kick it. Just don't. You know what I mean? Like, don't. In my heart, don't. I personally am not going to kick it. I don't want to kick it. I'm going to stay alive. I understand, based on a series of awareness tacticals developed in public about women stepping foot into the hospital as patients, many women have either experienced rape, trauma, misdrugging, or intentional harm in the hospital, in a doctor's office, in a physician's office, in a care room. I have personally been grabbed by an untrained kid's doctor. When the child is screaming in the corner and hyperventilating, you ask the individual, "What do you need? Can I get you a glass of water?" And if the individual shakes their head, you have to offer them something else. This is the yes and theory in theater and improv, because the issue is you have to offer it. If the individual can't see it, that's another conversation. I currently am not quite there at a doctor's level to quite grab that conversation properly, because I still wouldn't grab the child. You would need to make sure the child is in a safe, unlocked room, aware of the situation. Does this individual need immediate health care, i.e., are they screaming about like a broken leg or something like that? And you never, ever, ever touch the client until you gain consent, unless there is a violence threat. Violence threat. Facts. If the individual goes to reach for the glass thing in the doctor's office, A, you're in the wrong office, and B, you're in the wrong office. It's okay. We can put ourselves in the bouncy ball room to have therapy if we need to. I actually think that that's smarter, because I personally believe in artistic therapy, right to life, and the concept of what an art therapy space actually looks like for the majority population of BIPOC people, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I hate when I say people of color people, sorry. I hate this phrase. I fucking hate saying BIPOC. The population of raced individual, RACED in quotations, whatever. The healthcare room must prioritize this individual's conceptual reality of safe healthcare. Every single country, that is 269 countries in this world as far as I'm legally concerned at the very least, deserves their ethnic baited healthcare. That means if someone believes in God, they can go to, i.e., St. Paul's. If someone does not believe in God, they might go to the CAMH and then realize that there's like a specific no sage clause. And I will say, no, that's anti-Indigenous. You're pro-atheist. You are more willing to call someone religious unstable because you don't see the value in BIPOC religion. I personally do. I personally see the value in BIPOC religion. So long as the continual rates clause of the BIPOC religion is no one is to die, no doctor has the right to grab you. No single doctor will ever have the right to grab you. Unless you are a threat to yourself and others, physically and violently, the doctor will let you go. I have never once been held longer than 72 hours in one of these settings? This is for 3 reasons. 1, I don't find them ethical. 2, there is a clause where you can change doctors. And 3, if you are violent, you have been clocked as violent. Someone brown will clock you as violent. Interestingly enough, drag seems to be a crime to the CAMH because I got clocked for my hypersexuality. And I said, whoa, I literally don't sleep with people like that. Why do you think that a phone call where we're flirting is inappropriate? But whatever. I got really upset right away. I was like, whoa, what do you mean hypersexuality, you dumb bitch? I'm in a wig, and I know for a fact you see drag performers as hypersexual. I actually personally am a party princess drag performer, quote unquote. I do grade level party princess energy so that someone can sleep with actually adult Aurora or actually adult Snow White or actually adult Belle instead of idealizing the child version of the princess. The princesses, for the most part, with the exception of Pocahontas, by the way, and I think maybe Snow White, are legally 18. Many of these princesses are age coded as 18. Like you can't see them as kids. Otherwise, you degrade women in an entire spectrum as being de-aged. When you partake in Bibi Laboo stuff, doesn't matter what it is, the idea of kids' toys in an adult room regrains the space. So that would be like putting the Labubu on the Triple X stage, okay? If it's not adult furry level, it's child porn Labubu. By accident. You might not care as a de-age. The room must be aware, the security must be aware, and the audience must be aware of the innate idea of pedophilia in the bar. Who is paying who and why? Back to drug clauses. If you are taking a drug that can be legally interacted with by someone else in the room, you have to disclose the type of drug it is in the long run because someone is allergic. For example, there are multiple sober drag artists in Ontario. There are multiple sober drag artists in Vancouver. There are multiple sober drag artists in the States. You cannot force these drag artists to share clothes with someone who's under the table taking, i.e., ketamine or meth or crack, crystal and cracked, okay? Crystal crack up the nose. A benzodiazepine crushed up the nose. This is touch-based contact of a drug, and this is why the idea of COVID supersedes the idea of COVID. At 41 minutes, we're going to take another 3. Thank you so much, divas.
Yeah, fuck. What's wrong, Kyle? Man, these kids, man, talking shit, making it.
Okay, at 45 minutes, we have 5 minutes left of this lecture. If you watched in the middle, I pulled out 5 books. 8114 by Joshua Hull, Writing Mr. Right by Alina Kawaja, Avery Flynn's Head Witch in Charge, Grace Flavi's Palm Meridian, and Fan Favorite by Adrian Gunn. You can basically take a look at all of these books and understand what new romance looks like, including 2 canlit writers. That would be Grace Flavi and Alina Kawaja. These are tagged as new at the library, and the new stickers will eventually come off. They are just taped on. And the 2 Canadian books are sticker taped. So those ones are more permanent based, and they are not, if you can look at the video, this one can like be slid under just barely. Yeah. This is how the book pile works though at the library, and this is how I know who votes. The 2 can-lit authors, Grace Flavi and Alina Kawaja, are 2 very different people, and it is immediately obvious. Alina has an MA from Toronto Metropolitan University and a BA from the University of Toronto. And Grace has a McGill University English Literature degree and lives in London, UK. I would not consider Grace necessarily this Kentland author that you'd think, just because this was written and likely published through London. It's actually, oh, take it back, sorry. It's actually published through Simon & Schuster Canada. But I do agree that I wouldn't necessarily consider this Kentland. I'm so sorry. I appreciate you got your degree here, but that means nothing if you've been living in London since you got your degree and you look like you're like above the age of 40. And she's lived in the UK since 2014. I would consider this like a fraud-based Kentland section category, especially because she's white and lives in the UK. This is obvious because the book is a picture, and the book has a picture. It looks like it white, it presents white, and then Writing Mr. Right absolutely does not. This is where race theory comes back into the conversation, because if you think that Alina Kawaja has been given the same opportunities as Grace Flahive, I'm going to immediately tell you no. I'm going to immediately insinuate very quickly that the privileged perspective of living in London and getting published under Simon & Schuster Canada is high. And I think that this is also where the confusion around drugs, race, ethical consumption of media, religion, and overdose consumption sites comes to a head. Is the library a safe overdose consumption site? Do you take the benzodiazepine from your doctor? Does the doctor know how to prescribe the benzodiazepine to you? Are the staff ready to call 911? Do the staff know how to react to an overdose? Do the staff have the equipment on site to react to that overdose? The answer is no, usually. And the answer is, if every single person has to carry a naloxone kit because of the amount of people breathe inhaling fentanyl on the local public streets, this is a risk to children. This is a risk to every single person's bodily autonomy. It is a fraudulent community conversation about the ethics of drugs and the haptics of healthcare. At that being said, 49 minutes and 42 seconds. Have a lovely rest of your day, class, and I will see you all in a couple days for lecture number 2 this week. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon. Bye now.